I expect this every meeting.
I'm cutting taxes on your energy bills.
He did make a big deal about this first announcement, and it has fallen apart already.
Darren Jones embarrassed himself a bit today.
These are all Conservative policies. I just wonder when you're going to be happy about it.
He should say something specific. This is what I mean by airy-fairy stuff.
You've abandoned that now, haven't you?
Well, that was before COVID. That was before the war in Ukraine. That was before Iran.
Been there, learned that up.
Andy Burnham had a very long first day at the office. And it turned out a hard day's night trying to appoint his cabinet, some of whom were more willing than others to be appointed. But here's the joy of starting the most powerful job in the country without having to break into a sweat in an election campaign. You can still give the team a convincing pep talk a whole day later.
We feel like a good team. That's certainly how I feel today. A good team that reflects the party, the country, all backgrounds. You know, I think we're going to work really well together. So thank you, everybody.
Work really well together, you say? Let's just have a little look at how that went before, when Keir Starmer, remember him, was the boss. Ed Miliband, for one, made life very awkward for the then PM when he was having a little local difficulty over his appointment of Peter Mandelson as an ambassador.
Prime Ministers make errors. Prime Ministers are fallible. Prime Ministers are human. You know, as you know, I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader in 2010. But people make mistakes.
Well, it obviously wasn't the most collegiate intervention ever. And not long afterwards, he apparently told the PM to his face to quit. Mind you, Miliband's a veritable diplomat, ironically pretty much his new job as Foreign Secretary, compared to straight-talking Angela Rayner, who did an actual speech virtually saying Keir was, well, a bit crap.
We, as a party, have to do better than this. And we can only prove we mean our Labour values by putting the common interest ahead of factionalism. And we can start by accepting that Andy Burnham should never have been blocked.
OK, admittedly, she had quit the government long before, but still, can Burnham really count on her teamwork? We'll see. And then we come to the ministers who precipitated Starmer's demise by walking out in protest. John Healey, his new Chancellor, whose exocet from the MOD sent the then PM running for the bunker. And here's what the new Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, told me about Starmer on this show last month after he'd quit.
In terms of the Labour Party, I don't think he's listened to his cabinet. I don't think he's listened to the parliamentary party. And I don't think he's listened to the voters who only in May sent the Labour Party an extremely humbling message at the ballot box.
So don't be too surprised, Andy, if at some point Wes tells you what he really thinks. Just like in Love Island, which the new PM already appears to be manifesting on the government's official TikTok account.
This week, a hot new bombshell enters the villa. Don't call me up, I'm going out.
Whatever, Burnham should be braced, because as the first Catholic British PM, and a former altar boy at that, he'll be very familiar with the biblical tale of Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples who dobbed Jesus in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. So maybe his deep knowledge of both reality TV and scriptures will stand him in good stead. Well, hello and welcome to Tuesday's show. Lots to talk about tonight. We've got the new Energy Secretary Miatta Fahnbulleh and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch on the sofa. But before we get going, the suspect in the killing of Anne Widdecombe has appeared in court for the first time charged with murder, and we've heard from prosecutors. Let's go to Sky's Amelia Harper, who's outside the Old Bailey tonight. Amelia, just talk us through what's been said.
Well, today, 28-year-old Joshua Kerry appeared in court charged with the murder of the former Tory MP turned Reform UK spokeswoman Anne Widdecombe. He has been remanded in custody. Kerry, who is from Rotherham, over 260 miles away from Anne Widdecombe's address in Devon, initially appeared early this afternoon at Westminster Magistrates Court before the case was moved here to the High higher court of the Old Bailey, and that's because, Cathy, a murder charge can only be heard at a Crown Court. And these are the allegations that the prosecution set out today. Prosecutors allege that Anne Widdecombe was hit over the head 21 times with a hammer while she had her lunch at her home in Devon. In their words, they called it a planned and targeted attack. Initial investigations appear that Anne Widdecombe died from blunt force trauma injuries to her head. Prosecutors alleged that Kerry arrived at Anne Widdecombe's address, having driven there in a red Vauxhall Corsa, before entering the property through the front door. He was there for a total of about 2 minutes, they allege, before he hit her, before leaving the property, having also taken his wallet with her. Kerry was then arrested in Rotherham a few days after her death on the 11th of July. Police continue, of course, to try to establish any motivation behind this attack. We also heard in court today that Anne Widdecombe, on the date of her death, the 8th of July, was meant to have attended an online interview with Channel 5. However, when producers didn't hear from her, they contacted her personal assistant, who then got in touch with her gardener. Her gardener was then asked to go and check on her, which happened the next day on the 9th of July, where he sadly found her, according to the prosecution, with serious head injuries in the kitchen. Kerry appeared in the dock today wearing a grey tracksuit. He didn't give any indication of a plea. That will happen later. In terms of the dates for what happens next, he'll next appear here at the Old Bailey on the 9th of October for a case management hearing. Then we expect to have his plea hearing in November on the 20th. And a trial, a provisional trial date, has been set for June 2027, Cathy.
Amelia, thanks very much for bringing us that update. Well, let's return now to the new Prime Minister, and we started to get some big clues about what Andy Burnham's priorities are going to be as he gathered his new top team around the table for the first time. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
The morning after a reshuffle that stretched late into the night, the same Labour government, but now a new-look cabinet, as Andy Burnham's allies took the top jobs. Lucy Powell, are you happy to be Education Secretary? Yeah, and can you keep the party united? Shabana Mahmood, are you disappointed not to be Chancellor? Happy with your job? Ed Miliband, are you happy to be Foreign Secretary, sir? You not sad about the Chancellorship, sir? As Andy Burnham's allies took top jobs in a ruthless purge of those loyal to the last leader. Wes Streeting, can the party unite in this cabinet? Isn't it a vicious cull of Starmer allies, sir? Angela Rayner, can the party stay united under Andy Burnham? Is it a nest of singing birds, sir? Johnny Reynolds, can the party remain united, sir? Some of the old guard who called for Starmer to go themselves stayed, joined in the Downing Street Gardens by the Burnham backers who got their man here. Burnham convening his very first cabinet.
Can I just say, I expect this every meeting.
At the height of his power and with a very clear message.
We need to be a cost of living government. Life's hard out there, isn't it, at the moment?
Burnham using his first full day in office to make a down payment on his pledge to give people a bit more breathing space, with a cut to VAT on energy bills from October the 1st, saving you £45 a year and costing the government £850 million.
We've made a start today. We made the announcement about removing VAT from household electricity bills. It's not everything, but it shows our determination to do something about people's living standards, and it kind of points the way for further measures that we hope to take that pressure off people. But also it comes with reprioritisation, and you'll have seen what I've said about digital ID.
Burnham dropping plans for new ID cards to pay for cuts to energy bills, whilst seeking to reassure the markets his more left-wing government will maintain fiscal discipline.
We've got to show fiscal discipline. We've got to show that our commitment to the fiscal rules is real, and we're prepared to make difficult decisions in relation to that.
But for all the smiles in the cabinet room, the Labour Party not a nest of singing birds. Burnham's first major policy announcement already facing soundings off, as former Chief Secretary to the PM and architect of the digital ID programme, Darren Jones, tweeted the scheme was unfunded and that the government will have to set out how it will pay for its new policies at the budget. Payback perhaps for the purge, Harriet Harman unimpressed.
I need to speak to my colleagues who've been sacked from the cabinet and just say nobody wants to hear bitterness and resentment, and everybody wants this new regime to succeed, and that's for the good of the country and for the good of the party.
Burnham has made much of ending factionalism and bringing the Labour Party back together, but his cabinet picks were anything but, with 11 Starmer loyalists purged from the top table and another couple only hanging on by their fingertips. This may have been a bloodless coup, but this reshuffle was vicious, and some of the bad blood spilled was on show today. After talking a good game on unity, Burnham's first act failed to follow through. The next act is getting on with the job and cutting the cost of living. This something Starmer promised too, but failed to land. Burnham wants his new team to succeed, but his reshuffle may well make that a harder task. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Thank you.
We saw the new cabinet there starting their jobs. Here's our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, with more now on who they are and what it all tells us.
He's promising the biggest change for 40 years. So he's only kept 7 of the 27 members of Keir Starmer's cabinet. Who are they? What links them? What might they be like? Well, the big surprise was this man, John Healey, who's going to be Chancellor, seen as a safe pair of hands, safer than the other options. But the issue is that when he was Defence Secretary, more than a year into his time in office, there was a big black hole in the MOD's finances. Can he be trusted to manage the finances of every single government department? That's his challenge. Then there's Shabana Mahmood. She stays in the same job. The challenge for her, a lot of Labour MPs want to get rid of her immigration reforms. They thought she might be out the door, but now she's staying. That will be a big fight. And this man, it's a Miliband in the Foreign Office, but perhaps not the one that we thought. Ed Miliband. Now, he's pro-EU, pro-multilateralism, but tough for the special relationship. He's on record causing trouble on subjects that Donald Trump doesn't like, climate change and stopping the US from using bases in Diego Garcia. Could that be a wrinkle in the special relationship? Now, this person, Louise Haigh, maybe not a household name, but the most powerful female in the cabinet. She's First Secretary of State in the engine room of this government. She's the only woman at the very top table. But what does link these 4 most powerful figures at the top? Well, each one of these 4 did more than anybody else to get rid of Keir Starmer. They are linked by the fact that they were the ones that wielded the knife against the former Prime Minister. Could that be a problem? We'll see in time. So what happened to reformers, those on the right of the party, Blairites as we once called them? Well, Wes Streeting, he's ended up as Defence Secretary. I'm told that he once went to the Falkland Islands on a visit and was part of the Parliamentary Armed Forces Commission. So that's some of his background in that area. And this is Pat McFadden. He's another Blairite. He wants to reform welfare. Andy Burnham says he does too, but in the past has been quite nervous about going too far, taking entitlements away from people. So could that end up with him in a clash with his new boss? We'll see. But the thing is, quite a lot of the people who were rewarded in the reshuffle are actually allies, geographical and friends of Andy Burnham. So look at this. Lucy Powell, deputy leader of the Labour Party. She's ended up being Education Secretary. Then the person who drew up policy during the transition while he was an MP in the early days, that's Miatta Fahnbulleh. She's ended up as Energy Secretary. And the third one, a long-time friend, familiar face, former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, often sharing a karaoke mic with Andy Burnham. And she has ended up as being Housing Secretary. And there's a bit of a theme there, friendship and geographical relationships. Actually, you can see MPs out of London in the Labour Party dominate this cabinet. Here you've got Manchester and Birmingham, and you've got some MPs for others. Very few from the south. And the thing is, the Labour Party, its votes in the election, has become a bit of a party of the south, but that's not where its cabinet representation is. Could that be an issue? Because there are just so many friends of Andy Burnham that have ended up in cabinet like this one. Lisa Nandy survived in the culture role, an expanded brief, but she is back in the same job. Now, look at this. You've got Annalise Midgley, another northern female MP. She helped get Andy Burnham into that Makerfield seat. She is important as Chief Whip. But that leaves you with some anomalies. So just look at this one. This is Yvette Cooper. She was, until the start of this week, the Foreign Secretary. It's a demotion, but it's a demotion to a very important job for Labour, which is the Health Secretary. So will she be able to get across the detail in order to sort out that brief? We will see. Andy Burnham's cabinet is the key to his success. He says he's got 10 years of plans in order to fix Britain. But will these people prove to be the right people to advance his agenda?
Well, on the sofa tonight, our General Secretary of the University and College Union, Joe Grady, and former Conservative Cabinet Minister, now editor of The Spectator, Lord Gove. Plus, we also have our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joining us there. Sam, just as a brief sum-up, they are all playing nicely for now. They're all going off and doing their jobs today. But how long do you give it? What's your thought?
One of the things that came through just looking at the cabinet, how many friends of Andy Burnham there are. Are there too many friends of his who made it in and there wasn't enough opportunity to balance? Look, one of the interesting things about this period is we're in the honeymoon. Andy Burnham's team have promised 2 weeks of announcements, but the rubber hits the road, I think, in late September, October. That's when we're going to get three things. Conference, Labour conference and the big speech. We'll get the budget, which I expect in October. And then we're getting a new thing that we didn't know we were getting, Andy Burnham's 10-year plan. All of those three things within a matter of weeks. Andy Burnham's come in...
I was looking at Michael's face when you said 10-year plan.
Yeah, you heard it.
But Andy Burnham's come in at fairly short order and he's dropped the pretence that he had a fully fledged programme for Britain ready to go. And I don't actually think the public demand that of him today. And he's basically said, give me until October and then we can have something more substantial. I think that's fair enough, but the decisions he has to make then, they will be very, very tough.
Joe, is it a good team, do you think? Has he got the right pick? Are they going to glue together, given that half of them were sort of knifing Keir Starmer in the back, weren't they?
Well, first of all, I think it's an excellent team. I think there's some really good appointments in there. I think it's incredibly encouraging to see Angela Rayner back in a role that she's incredibly well suited for. I think it's really great to see Annalise Midgley in that role. She's a trade unionist. She worked for the TUC. It demonstrates the clear intention to have a good relationship with trade unions. I think there's some other candidates that I'm really happy to see Lucy Powell in education. And I think, you would say that some of them were knifing Keir Starmer, but what they were actually doing, I think, is saying, we need a transition to a different leader. This is not working.
So that they'll be good for Andy Burnham?
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing at the moment in the Labour Party, as Sam has said, is people coalescing around a positive message, around a reorienting of the message to the working people of the UK. And I think we've all got to really be positive and get behind that because we need to do that. We've got 3 years. Labour is in a last chance saloon. We've got 3 years to make sure that they make some changes and get re-elected when they seek it.
Michael, you know a thing or two about governments falling apart, cabinets sort of imploding. Can you see the seeds of the destruction there, or should we be more positive?
Been there, blown that up.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was going to be a little sharper and say, a thing or two about betrayal, thinking back to how you stitched up poor old Boris Johnson.
Great man. I think that the broad thrust of Andy Burnham's government is pretty clear. There may be one or two exceptions to this. It's a move further to the left. That's simply it. And critically, he showed both a degree of indecision over his Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he's shown vulnerability on a key element of economic credibility. Indecision in that he couldn't decide between the broadly centrist candidate, Shabana Mahmood, and the broadly left-wing candidate, Ed Miliband. So he chose John Healey, who's, perfectly capable minister. But still, that is a sign of indecision. And then on top of that, what's the big question about Andy Burnham? It's not his likability, it's his credibility in the financial markets. And what we've seen today is another unfunded commitment, which will only add, it's a small one, but it's real, to the sense that what he doesn't have is the grip on the economy that any progressive government needs if it's actually going to achieve anything.
We'll get on to that policy priority in a moment, but just respond to that, Jo. There's quite trenchant points there.
And you didn't have a grip on the economy, so I would take a progressive.
Personally, I was both, but still.
Well. So I think what we've seen from Burnham is some announcements that maybe in isolation aren't going to be enough. So I think how they make their announcements, what they combine them with, and we're going to see obviously more of them coming in the next few weeks, is important.
But the point about indecision that Michael Gove was making about the Chancellor?
I think that's a bit of projection. I mean, we know that Andy has been preparing and planning to hopefully take this role for a good part of a year now. We know that choosing a cabinet and who you maybe choose to keep and who you choose to ask to leave is as much about politics and ensuring that you kind of keep the show on the road. So, maybe some of it's indecision or maybe some of it is actually this is the way the chips have fallen and how we're going to proceed. So, we'll wait and see, won't we?
All right, well, lots more to discuss, not least on the policy, as you've just raised. And, of course, the new Burnham government came out of the blocks first thing with a 6 a.m. policy announcement on help with the cost of electricity bills. But less than an hour afterwards, as we saw in Beth's piece there, former senior minister Darren Jones was pouring cold water on the explanations we'd been getting on where the money was coming from for it. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Miatta Fahnbulleh, the new Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero.
Miatta, welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice
so
to see
much.
you. And last time you were here, you'd just walked out of the Starmer government and told us why. And here you are in the new government, and you can tell us why all over again. Must feel a bit surreal.
It does, but thank you for having me.
No, thanks for being on the sofa and also for colour coding with the sofa. Was that deliberate?
Miatta Fahnbulleh, thanks so much for coming back on the sofa. You've announced your first policy today. Is it already unravelling, though?
No, I don't think so. Look, we were really clear that the first day we want to signal that we understand that people are under a huge amount of pressure. So £45 off electricity bills by cutting VAT is a down payment to give people just a bit of breathing room whilst we do the job of driving down energy bills for good.
Paid for by scrapping the digital ID programme, you say. But Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the last Prime Minister, rather unhelpfully to you, tweeted that the digital ID programme was unfunded. The government will have to set out how it will pay for its new policies at the budget. The new Prime Minister, your boss, has said, you'll always show how you're going to pay for things. Isn't the truth that this is unfunded? You can't pay for it.
Well, listen, the OBR costed the digital ID scheme at £1.8 billion, and that was going to be covered by departments basically chipping in and making their contribution. And what the Prime Minister said is, look, this isn't a priority. It's not a priority for us as a government, but it's also not a priority for the public. Let's focus on what the public cares about. That's the cost of living. And so the contribution we were all going to make to the digital ID scheme, we're now making to cost of living.
Yeah, but the contribution that you were all going to make, those contributions have not yet been found, have they?
Well, listen, it will be within the envelope. The point is about prioritisation. What this whole exercise is about is, looking across what we are doing in government and saying, this is not key. This is key, cost of living, investment in our communities, lifting up people. Therefore, we put the resources where we can have the most impact on the thing that the public cares about, which is...
Departments will have to find savings, won't they? And if they can't find the savings, then you've got to increase borrowing or, raise taxes or cut other spending?
So, look, it is £150 million. It will be found because, candidly, Darren was a huge champion of digital ID. He was driving that through government.
It was his baby,
It was his baby.
Right.
All departments were being asked to make our contribution to delivering that scheme. The Prime Minister said, look, this isn't a priority for us. What is a priority is cost of living. So the resources will be found. It is funded within our existing envelope, and that process will happen in the way that it always does. So it's not unravelling, but the most important point, and the point I really want to get across, is, look, we get it. We understand that people are under pressure. It's really important for us to do the job of bearing down on energy bills. This is the down payment. By the way, it adds to the £150 that we had already taken off energy bills in April, and there is more to come.
Right, and I want to come back to that in just a second, but are you cross with Darren Jones for blowing the gaff? Is this the howl of a sort of wounded Starmerite?
I don't think so. Look, I've got a lot of time for Darren. I think he's a good guy. He was a really good minister. I think he did a lot of really good work in the Cabinet Office. That's not his style. He's really gracious, anyone that knows him. So I don't think it's, sour grapes or anything like that. As the, Secretary of State that's responsible for the policy, all I can say is that the policy is absolutely solid. It comes into effect in October so that we can give that breathing space to people straight away. And critically, we will all get on with the job of making sure that we are funding it.
OK, you said it's a down payment. Free basic energy guarantee, is that the next thing? Because I know you've been fond of that in the past. Is that something you'd like to look at?
Well, listen, we're really clear, and I got my marching orders from the Prime Minister, and he said affordability and getting energy bills down is the thing that I want you to do, and also making sure that we are investing in our communities. That about reindustrialisation. That's about, look, how do we get jobs in every part of the country that pay a decent wage? Those are the two things I've been tasked with delivering, and I'm absolutely committed to getting that done.
But that basic energy guarantee, so treating energy as a sort of, basic right, is that something you'd like to come back to, make the argument with the Treasury for?
Well, listen, we're going to be looking across the piece. I've got a really clear, set of marching orders. That is, we have to reduce bills. And look, one of the really important ways in which we will do this, and I'm going to keep making this point over and over again, part of the problem that we have at the moment, you take your mind back to the war in Ukraine, you take your mind back to, the war in Iran that's happening at the moment, it's having a huge impact on people's pockets because we're far too exposed to global fossil fuel markets. And one of the things that we have to do is reduce that exposure, which is homegrown energy that we control is so important. So that ability to invest to do that is really, really important to how we drive down bills in the long term.
OK, homegrown energy, North Sea oil and gas. Is it a price worth paying? I know it's not something you've supported, is eking out the last oil and gas in the North Sea, but is it a price worth paying if that helps get bills down?
Well, look, so the first thing I would say is that we are drilling in the North Sea, and we've been really clear consistently that oil and gas are part of the energy mix. They have to be part of the energy mix as we make this transition. The bit that really matters is the fact that actually at the moment oil and gas is being sold on these global fossil fuel markets that we have no control over. So if what we care about, which is what I absolutely care about, is how we get bills down and affordability, it does not solve that problem in the short term.
OK, but have you told the boss, because he seems to have told the American president that he's going to speed up development of the Rosebank oil field, the Jackdaw gas field. Trump says he'll be opening up the North Sea all the way. Has Trump got it wrong, or are you in disagreement with your boss already there?
Well, I'm not in disagreement with my boss.
Let's get that straight on day one.
Just get that straight on day one. Look, Rosebank and Jackdaw are part of a quasi-judicial process. So for your viewers, it's a kind of legal process. And I would ultimately have to make that decision. I've got to make it objectively. I've got to make it based on the evidence. So you'll forgive me if I don't go into speculation about it. What I will say, however, is that we have been really clear and very pragmatic about oil and gas and the fact that it is part of our energy mix. And ultimately, we've got to do the transition with that in mind. The final bit I'd say is, having spoken to, the trade unions and workers in that work in the North Sea, people are worried about how we get that transition right. I have ringing in my head one of our trade union bosses saying, we have never done industrial transition in this country well.
Right.
And we haven't. And that is, by the way, when people think about the 1980s and Thatcher, that was the thing that scarred us. And we've got to do that transition well.
It sounds like you've shifted a bit on that because, you're Secretary of State for net zero, and net zero has been a bit of a sort of passion project for you because, previously you've called for the UK to hit net zero within a decade rather than 2050. Have you abandoned that? Have you realised that's not realistic?
Well, listen, we've got a legally binding target to get to net zero by 2050.
Yeah, but you managed to do it a lot earlier.
Well, we then had the pandemic, we had Ukraine, we have Iran. My job is to make sure we do this transition. And listen, let me tell you
but
why...
can I just pin you down on that? Because that was what you used to say when you were running think tanks and so on. You've abandoned that now, have you?
Well, that was before COVID. That was before the war in Ukraine. That was before Iran. But listen, what I will say is I'm absolutely passionate to this transition. And the reason I am is because I'm a mother and I've got children, and anyone with children and grandchildren will care about that transition for future generations. But also, it is a massive opportunity because, candidly, it is the way in which, through homegrown renewables, clean energy that are cheaper, that we get bills down. But it's also the way in which we reindustrialise. So if I think about how we get investment in every part of the country, it is through the industries of the future. And that is the green economy, one of the fastest growing sectors that we have. And you look across to China, they are stealing a march on this. They can see this as a massive global market that is emerging before our eyes. And we have to make sure that we are right front and centre of being part of that and it benefiting our communities here.
I mean, you've got the kind of zeal of a convert on this, but have you managed to convert the Prime Minister? Because he's been a bit sort of, the new Prime Minister has been a bit sort of wishy-washy on it recently. You know, he was talking about the oil and gas in the North Sea and said last month, I've got something of an open mind. I don't have a fixed position. Are you going to fix his position for him?
Well, listen, no, look, I point everyone back to the manifesto. So we were really, really clear in that manifesto that actually, you know, there is a scope for existing licences and for us to exploit that. We have been consistently clear, and my boss before, my predecessor before this, that was my boss, Ed Miliband, was really clear that oil and gas are part of the mix. We're trying to take the country through a transition going into 2050. We recognise the role and the important role that oil and gas will play. The job at the end of all of this is to make sure that bills are affordable. And the problem, I keep taking people back to this, the problem is as long as we are dependent on global fossil fuel markets that we have no control over, that is the status quo here, that is what's happening with oil and gas that is being exploited in the North Sea at the moment. But it does not solve the affordability problem, and that's the number one thing that we have to crack.
Yeah, but getting there will cost, won't it? In the past, you've advocated wealth taxes and higher borrowing to fund that transition. Is that still something that is going to be a price worth paying, to coin a phrase?
Well, we've just got a new Chancellor, John Healey, who I'm really pleased about, and he's brilliant. I don't think I'll be... You're not going to write his budget? Well, listen, exactly. I don't think I'll be on his good list, which I desperately want to be, if I'm writing his budget and telling him what to do.
But you want to be on his good list because you know this is going to cost.
Well, I want to be... Every Secretary of State wants to be the Chancellor's best friend. And I'm no different. Yeah, absolutely. And look, John has the job of, you know, we're committed to the fiscal rules, and he's been clear about that. The Prime Minister's been clear about that. But we're also really clear that in the way that, you know, Rachel Reeves did, which was to make sure that we were investing in all the things that have been underinvested in, you know, and we're no longer in the politics of point scoring, so I'm not going to talk about 14 wasted years. But one of the travesties has been we've had a decade and a half where we haven't invested in infrastructure, whether that's energy infrastructure, whether that's transport. We haven't invested in our communities. Yeah. We've got to turn that around, and that's the bit that John has to work through.
You are a friend of Ed Miliband, you know, as you acknowledge. The Trump administration has called him an extremist today. An ally of Trump has called him a twit. Will you correct them?
I will correct them, because that is bang out of order first, and it's also not true. Like, I have worked with Ed Miliband. He is one of the smartest politicians I know. He's someone that is very, very clear. You know, politics, we're all in the business of politics because we want to change lives and change the world. And he has got that right in his DNA, but he's super strategic, he's super smart. He builds great relationships, so no doubt he's going to charm everyone in the US. But, you know, look, I think it sort of debates as politics when we name call and we do things like that. That's not the way that we do politics here. That's not what the Prime Minister will be doing, and no doubt that's not what the Foreign Secretary will be doing.
Just finally, you know, you fled the Liberian Civil War to come here 30 years ago. You've got a seat around the Cabinet table. So a very proud moment for you, your family?
It is. It is. And look, for me, so I represent Peckham, and I love, love, love the community I represent. And I think it's really important that young people growing up, whether it's Peckham or, you know, we're a massive constituency that goes from Nunhead through to Walworth, up to Elephant and Castle.
South London locations.
Exactly, all good South London locations. But it's really, really important that, you know, that generation of kids that are growing up can see someone like me that looks like me and know that I can be round the seat in government, and actually that is a pathway that's open to them. And I hope that's the thing that people take away from this.
Miatta Fahnbulleh, thanks very much for coming back to us on the couch to brief us on your progress. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Joe and Michael are on the sofa tonight. Joe, is it an unravelling of this VAT policy on electricity bills, or is it just a statement of priorities and departments will find the savings?
I think it's just a statement of priorities. I think Darren Jones embarrassed himself a bit today because I think it reveals more about the lack of planning of Starmer's government that he actually revealed that, you know, so I don't think it's a problem at all.
Michael?
Well, it's a significant problem. He was the minister, Darren Jones, in charge of it, and as your questioning brought out, it will take millions of pounds to provide a relief on people's electricity bills, and that money has to be found from somewhere, and it hasn't been identified. Now, I'm sure Joe is right that the Prime Minister, having made it a priority, that money will be found, but it will have to be found from somewhere, and in government that will mean that a grant to a charity will have to be cut, or the support for changes to veterans' housing will have to go, or support for the NHS to buy new drugs will have to be stopped. Now, these are priorities.
Though.
Absolutely.
Government. I mean,
but you can't magic the money from anywhere. There's one other point that does need to be made, of course, which is that it's striking that the first tax cut that Andy Burnham makes is one that is only possible because we're outside the European Union. We couldn't have reduced VAT to zero in this way were we still in the EU.
We found the one benefit of it then, have we?
It's one of many.
At least this money, will be going to reducing the energy bills. You know, you spent 35 million on free schools that just disappeared. So I think this is a great thing.
Well,
they're the best schools in the country.
Well, they don't exist anymore, so how would we know?
No. I don't know why Joe is mentioning free schools, because it's a huge policy success.
Yeah,
let's not go down
everyone
a free schools rabbit hole right now. But just on the energy policy and this cost of living government, what they've made clear is that this is a mere down payment. So there'll be a lot more expensive policies coming down the track, including maybe, you know, basic energy guarantee, for example, which obviously Miatta is personally very fond of. Isn't that the problem, that there's a kind of open-ended commitment rolling out here?
I'm not entirely sure, and I have to say, having just watched Miatta just then, I think Andy Burnham has selected an excellent communicator who really understands this problem, who is an expert on it, and we love experts, and who understands the nuance. So I think that she will do a good job of communicating to the public where we're going with this, what we might have to reorientate if we're going to. She's made it really clear that we're not moving away from oil and gas, but that we have to invest in other renewables to make sure that we're not totally exposed to foreign markets like we currently are.
And she's also tempered her desire to rush to net zero. But, nevertheless, getting to net zero will cost. There's a lot of spending commitments being sort of mooted for the future, aren't there, Michael?
Yes, there certainly are. So investment in renewables relies on subsidy. That's one of the ways in which the playing field is adjusted.
But it could generate great growth.
Renewables can generate energy and growth, but ultimately they add overall to the cost of energy. You do not have anywhere in the developed world a country with energy costs as high as in the United Kingdom. That is a direct result of Ed Miliband's policies. Those policies can change. Joe is right. Miatta Fahnbulleh is clearly a hugely impressive individual, intellectually accomplished, politically smart, but she's inherited a policy from Ed Miliband of high energy costs and also leaving resources in the ground. Norway, hardly an international pariah, takes full advantage of the oil and gas in the North Sea. We don't.
But interestingly, Norway benefit from it, don't they? Because they didn't privatise it all. So which I do think makes quite a key difference.
There's an ideological gulf on the sofa.
But I think, look,
I don't care if it's done by the state or by the private sector.
Because Norway have a massive trust sovereign wealth fund that benefits that society that we don't have.
Because they're extracting the oil and gas from the North Sea.
Because they didn't sell it off like the Tories did. It's a historical truth that unfortunately means that we're quite shafted as a country.
But it's a lovely meander down memory lane. However,
unfortunately, it's very relevant to the current period, isn't it?
What is more relevant is the fact that oil and gas remains there. And there's a broader point as well. Miatta Fahnbulleh makes the point, which is, of course, accurate, that legally she can't, decide on that. Why not? Because of legislation that has been put in place by ministers. One of the things that many people find frustrating is when ministers say, I can't do this because, it would be illegal. You make the laws.
Right.
Change the laws and lower the price of energy.
Okay.
If they're prepared to do that, then they're taking it seriously.
Can I say one thing? No, really,
very briefly.
Super quickly. Investing in alternative renewable energy is important, not just to get us off the hook to foreign markets, but because we need to train workers in it, we need to pay the education workers that train those people properly. It is investing in the future in skilled jobs as well as moving away from drilling.
OK, much more to discuss another time. But with those claims that the new PM is spending money he doesn't have, I caught up with Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, who gave a speech at the Farnborough Air Show a bit earlier. Kemi Badenoch, Andy Burnham vowed yesterday to bring back hope. Do you feel hopeful?
Well, I wish him well. He is the Prime Minister of our country, and we want whoever's running the country to run it well. But just simply talking about hope is not enough. He needs to show us what his plans are. And every interview that he's given, he has hinted about tax rises. And I think we're seeing a very clear difference now between the Conservative offer, which is to cut welfare, bring down taxes, back businesses to get jobs and growth, and Labour's plans, which seem to be increased spending, increasing welfare, and inevitably increased taxes.
Can't you give him 24 hours to be a bit hopeful and get his feet under the table? He's been really nice about you. He said you're much more capable than her predecessors. And you, in return, have said about him, he's a people pleaser with airy-fairy plans. He's a pair of eyelashes and a black T-shirt. I'm just wondering if you're being a bit mean girls, Kemi.
I think I'm being actually quite complimentary, and what he was saying was a snipe at my predecessors. We will have all sorts of joshing. That's the way politics works. But what's really important is what's he actually going to do. Yesterday may be his first official day as Prime Minister, but we've known he's been coming in for a few weeks, dare I say a few months now. And he has spent that time hiding from scrutiny, not wanting to answer questions. He didn't want to come to Parliament, where we MPs are elected on behalf of the people of this country to ask questions. He wants to wait until after the summer. A lot of damage can be done in that time if there's endless speculation with no clear plans about what he's going to do with the country. My key worry is about increased taxes. I'm here at a defence conference, and the defence industry, the aerospace industry, the people who will help protect us are saying that it's getting very hard to do business in this country. What's Andy Burnham going to do to help businesses like these, right all the way down to small businesses on the high street? He hasn't said anything yet.
Well, I'll come back, because he has made his first policy announcement today, which is pretty fast out the traps. So I'll come back to the details of that in just a second. But just broadly, he says he wants to do politics differently. He wants to find common ground with the likes of yourself. And you're saying, well, it's going to be the usual joshing. Can't you meet him halfway?
Well, actually, I haven't said that. You were the one who said that he said this and I said that. I've actually written to him and made an offer to work with him to... Yes, but that's not a substantive thing. What I have actually said that is substantive is the letter I wrote to him on Sunday, where I made an offer to work together to cut welfare spending. He clearly doesn't have the votes on his backbenches, despite a huge majority. So that's what a constructive opposition does. I'm not paid to be his cheerleader. I'm paid to hold him to account, and I'm not going to be stopped from doing my job. My job as leader of the opposition is to steer the government the right way if I think they're doing wrong, and expose where they are getting things wrong, holding them to account. I'm going to keep doing my job.
Well, you talk about welfare, but why don't you make the same offer on social care? You haven't got an adult social care policy. He hasn't either. Why don't you come together in the national interest?
Well, he needs to say exactly what his plans are. We can see what the plans are on welfare. We've got welfare spending all locked up until 2031, and yet the defence investment plan for this year is underfunded. So we're dealing with the problems that are absolutely critical. This issue of defence is the first duty of any government. Defence of the realm is the first duty of any government. And John Healey, the new Chancellor, resigned as Defence Secretary, saying that Labour was not doing enough to protect the country. That's where we should start. That is a very serious charge. We just had Russia conducting live fire exercises just off the British coast yesterday. This is a significant issue. It's absolutely massive, and that's where we Conservatives are focused on. And as you can see, there is a clear difference in terms of priorities. I mean, you've just drawn some of that clear blue water yourself. We want to talk about defence. We want to talk about bringing down welfare. they're lowering taxes, and he wants to talk about something else.
Right, well, I'll come back to defence in just a second. But on the policy they have announced today, removing VAT from household energy bills, that is a Conservative policy, so I'm assuming you'll support that at least.
Well, it's part of a Conservative policy. We have a cheap power plan that will save £200 off bills for both households and businesses, and off all energy bills, not just electricity. He's scrapping VAT, which we do think is a good thing, but we found the money for ours. We were going to take it out of Ed Miliband's net zero subsidies, and it doesn't look like his are funded. We had Darren Jones saying that the money which he claims to be using was never funded in the first place. So his first announcement has already fallen apart. That doesn't bode well. Of course, it is the first day, as you say. He needs time to get his feet under the table. But he did make a big deal about this first announcement, and it has fallen apart already. That's concerning.
You're very hard to please, though, because he's also signalled a move on the net zero stuff. He's moved Ed Miliband out of that department. He's going to do something on North Sea oil. These are all Conservative policies. I just wonder when you're going to be happy about it.
Yeah, but they're not specific. He's going to do something on North Sea oil. What does that mean? I have said we need to start new oil and gas licenses and start drilling our own oil and gas instead of importing it from countries that drill it, in a much dirtier fashion, like Qatar or even Russia. So he should say something specific. This is what I mean by airy-fairy stuff. Just simply saying, I'm going to do something. That's not what a prime minister is supposed to be doing. He needs to announce specifics. You talked about his energy announcement. I explained why, well, it's only a small part of what we said. It's a good step, but his own MPs are saying it's not funded. I mean, it didn't even need the leader of the opposition to point that out. So if you're asking when am I going to be pleased, it's not about pleasing me. It's about doing the right thing for the country. And I'm going to keep pointing out where I think he's either doing the wrong thing or perhaps not doing enough.
I never thought I'd hear that, the Starmerites are doing your job for you. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Darren Jones has come out and pointed out that some of the things which Andy Burnham is talking about are unfunded. He would know, as a minister up until yesterday, we, the opposition, haven't had sight of what's going on in the book. So it's very interesting that they are saying that. Obviously, Parliament's not sitting. I'm not able to ask Andy Burnham any questions until September. He's done that deliberately because I think he's afraid of some of the questions that I will be asking him. It's very important that a government gets proper scrutiny and doesn't just spend the summer holidays saying that they're going to do some things and they're offering hope. Those are just words. We want some specifics.
OK, well, in the absence of you or me being able to ask him questions right now, let me put another Conservative policy to you that he's also signalled that he embraces, which is the tax-free personal allowance. He's got that in his sights. You've bitterly complained about it. You'd back movement on that, I'm assuming.
So what exactly is he saying? What exactly is he doing? Again, these are all just light signals, but no specifics. He's been signalling on tax. That worries me. If he's going to tax other people just outside the personal allowance to pay for it, this is a problem. And as I said, we are now beginning to see very, very clear differences emerging with Andy Burnham and myself. He looks like he wants to tax a lot more, whether it's to, take a little bit of money off energy bills, do something with the personal allowance, we don't know. But he has been saying more tax is coming. That worries me. Conservatives are the only party that really want to back business to create jobs and growth. They're the ones who can do it. It's not more politicians or more mayors, and it really isn't by increasing taxes that kills growth.
Right.
So we are going to be calling for lower taxes and less spending, especially on welfare, and backing business to create the growth.
What about defence bonds to help fund the defence industry? The MOD has a massive black hole, as you know. You're there at the Farnborough Air Show. Would you support exploring that as an innovative way of funding our defence needs?
So I've just given a keynote speech at the Farnborough Air Show, which is a defence and aerospace conference, and I said very clearly that defence bonds are just a fancy way of dressing up more borrowing. We already spend more on the interests on our debt than we do on defence. More borrowing only makes this problem worse. We should not be increasing borrowing. We should not be increasing taxes. We should be cutting spending. There is so much waste. There are a lot of people who can work who are not working. Welfare is supposed to be for those people who cannot work, those who are vulnerable. We want to look after them, but being on welfare should not be a lifestyle choice.
Right.
And given that defence is now the #1 priority, that's where we need to start putting some of that money into.
OK. Just finally, you've been complaining about not being able to scrutinise what Andy Burnham is saying in Parliament. Reform wants a general election. Will you back their call for a general election? You might even win it.
Well, I've always said that if Andy Burnham does not fund the defence investment plan, he should call a general election. I'm the leader of the opposition. Of course I want a general election. I have better policies. And as I said just last week, we are getting ready for a general election that could be called at any time. Andy Burnham may change his mind and choose to have a snap election. But elections alone are not going to solve the country's problems. You need a plan. This is the same mistake that Keir Starmer made. And to be perfectly honest, it's the same mistake that some of my predecessors made. Having an election without knowing what you're going to deliver does cause problems. We saw it with the Brexit referendum, where Leave won, but there was no plan for leaving. We had to start making up the plans while we were in government. This is so dangerous. And so when you hear people talking about elections, ask them, what is your plan? Nigel Farage doesn't even have a defence spokesman. He's not even an MP. How is he ready for an election? Right. There's so much unseriousness now. Let's have an election,
ready, are you?
but let's make sure that. But let's of course I am. I set out an alternative King's Speech. I've got a shadow cabinet of people who are ready. We have people who are ready to fund an election. I am ready. But what's going to happen with the defence investment plan? John Healey says the country is not being protected, not being defended. Why does everybody not want to talk about that? We need to stop treating elections as if they're just strictly come dancing. They are not a popularity contest. They are asking the public who they want to run the country based on the plans we offer. And right now, what I'm seeing is no plans from Reform, some not very serious plans from Labour, with some very bad things like tax rises on the horizon. Conservatives are the only ones who want to bring taxes down by cutting spending on welfare, backing business to create jobs and growth.
You talk about Strictly Come Dancing. Andy Burnham's arrival in number 10 has been compared to arriving in the Love Island villa. What do you make of that?
I don't know who said that. I think some people will always have something to say about an arrival. What I would like to say is that there was a lot less noise when he was giving his speech, because I've been working with the Met Police to get that terrible man who keeps braying above prime ministers when the country should be hearing them speak in dignity. So I hope Andy Burnham's going to say thank you for that, because I did write to the Met Commissioner. I think it's important that we preserve the dignity of the office of Prime Minister.
Kemi Badenoch, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's really interesting because Andy Burnham has said he wants a new form of politics to find common ground with other opposition parties. But judging by that interview, he's got his work cut out. I put to Kemi Badenoch there a whole raft of Conservative policies that Andy Burnham seems to be backing, but she's not having any of it. She's not even giving him 24 hours to get his feet under the table. The joshing, it seems to me, as she put it, will carry on as normal. So she speaks about Strictly Come Dancing there, you heard her. Well, I don't think Andy Burnham is going to be tangoing with her anytime soon. Kemi Badenoch there. But let's talk about the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband, because there's lots to discuss there. He's off to a summit in the Philippines already tonight, so he gets ready to start filling his passport up. But there have been rumblings about whether his appointment is going to anger the Americans. And there's been a lot of talk about his track record in the past on foreign policy. Joe and Michael are on the sofa tonight. Michael, there's been a lot of bad blood in and around the Trump administration about appointing Ed Miliband. One of the reasons perhaps he didn't get the job as Chancellor, you know, someone in the administration talking about how he's an extremist on net zero, he's a twit. This is a friend of Donald Trump saying that. Was this an error to appoint him in this role, do you think, or realistically will it be Andy Burnham doing the diplomacy with Donald Trump?
Well, it's not an error for that reason. I do think that Ed Miliband made a mistake when he was leader of the Labour Party over intervention in Syria. Put that to one side.
Well, I want to come back to that, though.
I'm very happy to go back to that. But the fact that a foreign leader says that someone who the Prime Minister believes is right for the Cabinet shouldn't be appointed, well, we should tell that foreign leader, whoever he is, you do not interfere in our domestic affairs. More than that, I think, while Ed Miliband has said some sort of tart things about President Trump, I don't think they're anything worse than his own Vice President has said.
True. Well, Joe, let's talk about, Michael brought up the Syria intervention, and the bad blood does go back that far, doesn't it? Because Ed Miliband was leader of the Labour Party, voted against military action in Syria in 2013, and that then scuppered Barack Obama's plans to tackle Assad. I mean, America has a long memory on these things, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think more recently, and I think this is what's important for us in the UK and the British public, is actually one of the few things that I think Keir Starmer enjoyed a boost in popularity for recently was actually standing up to Trump over Iran and the prospect of the UK being dragged into an unpopular and costly and illegal war. So I actually think for the spectrum of fans and haters that Ed Miliband probably has in the UK, I actually think a bit of hate coming from the White House is not a bad thing. I don't think Donald Trump is probably held in extremely high regard by a lot of people who'd be voting for Labour. So
it's a vote winner, Michael.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, obviously, President Obama was a very different figure on the international stage from President Trump. And
Understatement.
And I think Joe and I probably agree on that.
Maybe not much else.
And I think it was a mistake because, as a consequence of our failure to uphold international law and the red line against the use of chemical weapons, Assad stayed in power. Putin was emboldened.
Well, except that Labour's opposition was not decisive, was it? Because our very own John Craig was reminding me this afternoon that there were 30 Tory rebels.
There certainly were.
And if they hadn't voted against David Cameron, then he'd have won the vote.
That is certainly true. So Ed Miliband had given David Cameron to understand earlier that he'd support him. He made his own decision, and he has subsequently explained that. But there were also 30 Tories who didn't vote for that intervention. I think they were wrong. And in fact, on the floor of the House of Commons that night, I made my anger with those people who'd voted, as I felt, to let Bashar Assad off the hook very clear. But again, Ed Miliband, to be fair, has an accomplished record. I disagree with a lot of the positions he's taken, but he's clearly a very able guy, so he deserves a fresh start as Foreign Secretary.
Right, well, it's been a slightly frosty atmosphere on the sofa tonight, but you've both...
I think we agree on the last point.
I tell you what we didn't agree on, though.
I haven't got time to hear,
I'm afraid.
you would
love it. It's a shame. It's a humdinger.
Right.
Oh, yes.
In 5 seconds.
He supported Argentina in the World Cup. Bullies, cried when they lost, and we weren't talking about the Tories, we were talking about Argentina.
Well, before we go tonight, one day they're running the country, the next they're, well, in the pub. Keir Starmer and separately Rachel Reeves were both spotted, glass in hand, after what most would term a rough day at work. And we checked the archives, and they're not the only ones. Theresa May opted for the cricket, as did John Major, the day after Blair got his landslide. But however you're spending your evening, that's it from us for tonight. From my sofa guests here in the studio too. We'll see you again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Good evening.